Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama. And before we get into our conversation, if you would like to support the podcast, please go to convome.com/support. And there you'll be able to make a donation to the podcast. All proceeds go towards keeping the podcast running. And I appreciate your support. And now, on to the conversation. My guest this week is Sarah from Made on the Common. She sells spreadsheets and solutions for handmade business owners. And we're going to talk all about how she started doing that and how what she makes can help you as an Etsy seller. So this conversation is not just about an Etsy seller, it's also about how to help you as the Etsy seller be better and more organized in your business. So Sarah, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on. And one of the reasons I was particularly excited about having you on was because you provide a solution that, one, can help us get organized, but two, when I was looking at the spreadsheets you have, you included things that for me have been a source of confusion. Like I don't know if you say VAT or VAT. Which is it, by the way? Is it VAT?
You can say either, actually. I would normally say probably VAT, but it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Yes, because that has kind of been a struggling point for me. And so I thought, okay, good. Finally, somebody who is qualified to explain this to me, because I'm tired of trying to read it and understand it. So anyway, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast. And before we start our conversation, can you just tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up selling on Etsy?
Okay, so I think some people are kind of born to be entrepreneurs or set up business, and I definitely wasn't one of those people.
No.
So I qualified as an accountant way back in the 90s, I think. I'm kind of older than, I guess, your average Etsy seller. But I've worked as an accountant, I guess, for 20 odd years, always employed by somebody else. And I kind of always worked in more of a commercial role. So not really just doing people's books, but working with sales teams. So I was kind of financial support for a sales team. And I guess I always did that. And I'd kind of worked my way up in kind of the corporate world, I suppose, to I actually ended up working in Zurich in Europe as a kind of European kind of business analyst, I guess. And so I was kind of quite happy doing that. And then I think it was one of those situations where you get your dream job and then discover that it wasn't really your dream after all.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up coming back to the UK, and I was always with the same company, but kind of came back and took on a role back in the UK. And then in 2014, they actually closed our UK office and moved it elsewhere in the country. And so I took redundancy at that point, and it was a great opportunity because it made me kind of do something else. And that was probably when I first discovered Etsy, although I didn't actually start selling until 2018, I think it was. And originally, I had no intention at all of selling spreadsheets. It was almost the last thing I wanted to do because I'd spent my whole life working with spreadsheets. And my original goal, I know sometimes you ask what people's original goal was, and mine was just to sell something that I'd made. I just wanted to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And so Etsy is just a way of doing this. And actually, my first product that I listed, like I say, back in 2018, was some bookmarks. I mean, such a different thing. I just wanted to make something and sell it. And I'm not a massively talented creator like a lot of your guests are. But I just found something that I could make. I thought, that's great. I'll list that and sell that. And then I think as soon as I'd listed that, I thought, I don't really know why I'm doing this. I don't really want to do this. This is crazy. And I think actually I think I worked out I would have to sell like hundreds and hundreds of these things to actually make any money. So in with my accountant head on, I guess, I thought that's not going to make sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was at that point that I discovered that you could sell printables on Etsy. And so I think my first proper listing, so I don't really count the bookmarks, I think I pulled them before I'd sold any anyway. I actually listed an annual planner as like a printable. And that was the first thing that I sold. And I'd kind of, I guess I thought I would stick with printables.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, because I know a lot of people create their printables in Canva, but I actually created mine in Excel. So back to spreadsheets, I guess,
Yeah.
because you can create quite good calendars and planners in it using a spreadsheet. Because if you think about it, it has dates in there and it has kind of boxes and grids and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was, to me, it was just like, oh, okay, I think I found a post on Pinterest actually that showed you, that kind of explained that you could use Excel to make printables. And so
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'll do that. And that was the first thing that I sold. And I sold a few of those through 2018, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I had the idea that, oh, well, okay, well, I sell these, but why don't I sell the spreadsheet that makes the planners? And so I listed my first spreadsheet was actually a monthly planner, which I still sell now. And so that was the first spreadsheet. And that taught me a lot in terms of how you explain how to use a spreadsheet to people. Um, because it isn't as straightforward as just print it out. Obviously you need to understand where to add data and where to change things,
Yeah.
and how to use it. And I think also once I'd started selling, that was what opened my eyes to kind of the mess that is Etsy finances and how difficult they are to kind
Yes.
of understand, which I know is just so complicated. And you asked about VAT. Well, funny enough, when I sold my very first printable, the thing that suddenly shocked me was that my customer had been charged VAT
Mm-hmm.
on the printable. And I thought, well, I'm not VAT registered. I'm in the UK, but I'm not registered. So why, I thought I'd done something wrong, that, my customer had been charged this tax. And so then researching, I discovered that no, that's something that Etsy have to charge. And then it was, well, okay, well, how do I see how much I've been paid and what fees have I been charged? And so I set up my own kind of spreadsheet, bookkeeping spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
to try and make sense of the numbers that I'd got. And because of, I guess, my background, I was always used to downloading data from a source and dropping it into a spreadsheet and then turning that into a report. That's kind of what I did in my day job. So it made sense to me to find a way of downloading from Etsy, dropping the data into a spreadsheet, and then turning that into the figures that I needed, and which is where my bookkeeping spreadsheets came from. And I guess that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I like the trajectory because um, a lot of people give up when something they're selling just doesn't seem to hit or is not resonating with them.
Mm.
And I like how through trial and error you figured out what your true niche was, and it didn't take any type of keyword research or what's popular or what's trending. It came out of a need that you felt as a seller yourself, and now you've expanded beyond just Etsy. You have spreadsheets for people who sell on Etsy and Shopify, or Etsy and Amazon, or just different platforms. Would you say, oh, and eBay, of course, would you say that the spreadsheets that you provide can essentially replace a bookkeeper, or that they're more designed for us as sellers to gather the information that we can then hand over to our accountant who's helping us file taxes?
I think I would say they can replace the bookkeeper, because I think anybody can do their own bookkeeping, because it's really just organizing your figures. That's all the bookkeeping side of it is.
Okay.
And so I think everybody can do that. And I also think everybody should do that, because I think if you don't understand your numbers and how much money you're making, then it's very difficult to be really successful.
Mm.
I don't think they replace an accountant necessarily, or doing, and that it really comes down to how confident you are and how complicated your business is. I think if you just have a few sales a month and it's really a kind of a sideline, and it's you don't have anything else complicated in there, you're not VAT registered or tax registered, or you're not adding this into another business, then yes, people can and do it themselves. And I mean, I have a lot of customers who do complete their own tax returns, and that's fine. But I think there is always a point, and I would always say you should double check with a local accountant, really, because
Okay.
I don't. I mean, obviously, I'm UK based. I sell an awful lot into Canada and into the US,
Hmm.
but I'm by no means an expert in the tax of those countries, and so
Yeah.
I'm no substitute for running it past your local accountant.
Okay. And one of the things I like, and I really want sellers who are listening to this to be aware, because the regulations are different across different countries. Like you said, you have products that are geared towards Canadian sellers and products geared towards US sellers and UK sellers. And I really like that because we are different in some things. And so the fact that you've taken that into account in the products you create, I think makes what you're doing quite different from some other spreadsheets that I've seen for sale on Etsy.
Yeah, and I mean, thank you for that. But I a lot of the kind of the variations that I have actually been driven by requests from customers. So quite often
Mm.
somebody will contact me and say, "Oh, I see you do it for the UK. Could you do it for Canada?" And I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Etsy work very differently in different countries.
Mm.
And this is something that I guess I've learned as I've gone along, just with working with so many people. But the way, particularly when it comes to taxes, and how tax is handled. So, for example, in the US, most of the sales tax is taken care of by Etsy,
Hmm.
if I'm right,
Yes,
what I understand. So they will actually charge a customer based on where they look at where the customer is and they charge the tax,
that's
and then
correct.
they withhold it and they pay it over themselves.
Yeah.
And that isn't the case elsewhere. So if you're VAT registered in the UK, for example, Etsy will not deal with any of the VAT for you. So you charge the customer a price, and you then have to work out how much VAT was in that sale, take it out of your sales, and pay it over. So Etsy don't do any of that for you. Um, and there was a big change in Canada this year in July. So they used to do the tax and kind of pay it over to the Canadian seller for them to pay over. And then from the 1st of July, they no longer do. So again, it meant I had to
Mm.
create brand new templates that would
Yeah.
then calculate all of the GST and the PST, depending on which province you're in, and all of this. So all gets really complicated. And that's, again, they've kind of evolved over time. So as I've been asked for somebody, or they'll say, "Oh, well, I bought your US one, but actually it doesn't work in Canada because of this, or could you add
Mm.
this in?" Or And that's kind of how they've all evolved over time. I'd say 90% of the templates have been requests from somebody
Wow.
to say, "Oh, could you?" So like the different platforms have been because somebody said, "Oh, I have your Etsy spreadsheet, but I also sell on Amazon. Could you add on an Amazon section?"
Oh,
So
nice.
which is fabulous for me
Yeah.
because, like I say, I have this massive list of templates still to be developed, sort
Oh,
of thing, which is
wow.
great. Yeah.
That's so great that your market is helping you create your products. You don't,
Oh, it's fabulous. It's absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
And yeah,
you
and
don't,
it's kind of
no, go on, please.
no, I was going to say, so I had a lot of messages back at the end of last year when Etsy made the big change to the
Yeah.
payment account.
Hmm.
So everybody who had one of my templates from last year, I was getting all these messages saying, "Oh, that doesn't work anymore because everything's
Mm.
changed on Etsy, and what do we do?"
Hmm.
And I hadn't even been aware of it until I started getting the messages through. So it's great. I have this kind of base of people who point out to me when things change on Etsy and things don't work, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, we need to have a look at that and see what we can do. So
Yeah. And what happens in a situation like that when Etsy changes something so integral to what we as sellers are doing? Do you direct previous customers on how to update the calculator in the spreadsheets, or do you create a whole new one? And
it kind of depends on what the change is. So for the change that happened back in January, when it was like just that the data had changed,
Mhm.
I updated because obviously I needed to update it to be able to sell it this year anyway. But then if you've previously bought a template from me, and if it's something like that that's a pure Etsy change, then
Mhm.
you get a free template, you get an update for free. So it's one of the kind of things that I offer. For the
Fabulous.
Canadian tax change this summer, because that needed a brand new template, then
Mhm.
that was a new purchase.
Yeah.
But if you were on my email list and you'd already purchased, then I kind of gave it quite a big discount. So I
Okay.
just think it's one of those things, because I don't want somebody to have to buy every year.
Yeah.
And also I don't know. I think just because I have to do the work anyway, so why not get it? You can have it for free. It's fine.
Okay. I like that. Um, can your spreadsheets, I know they're Excel, but can they work as effectively in Google Sheets for people who don't subscribe to Microsoft Excel?
I have versions that are written specifically for sheets.
Okay.
Um, so normally they're fairly interchangeable. So I would normally say that if it works in Excel, it would work in Sheets. But because of some of the formulas that I use,
Mhm.
unfortunately, they don't translate automatically into Sheets. Some of it doesn't get read properly.
Mhm.
And so what I did was I just convert them into Google Sheets and then give you a link. So there's always a link provided. I think I have just one or two that I haven't got into Sheets yet, but most of the others will work in Sheets.
Okay.
Um, they don't work in numbers, unfortunately, at the moment. So if you've got a Mac, it's something that I'm hoping to look at. I think I might be able to convert the Google Sheets version back into a numbers version.
Okay.
Um, but I haven't done that. I'm an old fashioned kind of Windows girl, so
Yeah.
I'm just getting. I have got a Mac now, and I do use it occasionally, but I'm still kind of learning. So yeah, but it's something I'd like to do. Um,
Oh,
I
yeah.
find the Google. I know some people like Google Sheets. I find it can be a little bit slow, just
Mhm.
because of the volume of data. If you think how much data goes through your payment account on Etsy,
Yeah.
just because you get like about, I don't know, about 10 lines for every sale that you make, it adds up to like thousands and thousands of lines for a lot of sellers.
Mm.
And I find it's just really slow to update. Um, there might be ways of speeding it up, I'm not sure, but I find Excel is faster, but I think if I could get it into numbers, then that might be faster.
Okay. And is this better used on a local version of Excel, or the Excel that now Microsoft is selling, the one in the cloud?
Yeah. Again, I think if you have an awful lot of data, I
Hmm.
would recommend doing it on the local version,
Okay.
because I think it's more robust and obviously it's much faster.
Yeah.
Anything that you use in the cloud, you're always only as fast as your internet connection, so
Very
it
true.
can get a bit slow.
Very true. So I would imagine that with the type of product you sell, it's different from other digital downloads that people typically sell on Etsy, in that when a buyer purchases it and starts to use it, and a buyer being pretty much all of us who are listening to this podcast right now, because we are your customer, um, questions come up after. What kind of after purchase support or customer service support do you provide? Because I can imagine just the initial getting used to using the spreadsheets and knowing where to put the numbers and understand the
Yeah.
calculations brings up a lot of questions.
Yes, I mean, it can do. I hope I've got most of it covered. So again, because I've kind of been doing it for a couple of years now and have I think I've sold over 3,000 now, which is fabulous. It's like more than I ever dreamt
Congratulations.
I would ever sell, which is great. Um, and I was finding that I'd get a lot of the same questions coming up. So I mean, every spreadsheet comes with some instructions, and they're quite kind of comprehensive and lots
Mhm,
of pictures because I always think pictures help.
mhm,
Um, so that answers a lot of the questions. And then I created like a troubleshooting guide as well, because again, I've found that in different countries, certain things cause issues. The big, the biggest issue I have with everybody is dates.
mm,
So unless you're in the US, if you're in the US, it's not a problem at all. If you're anywhere else, Canada, Australia, UK, getting the data from Etsy and into a spreadsheet that your spreadsheet will understand
mhm,
is just a complete nightmare.
mm.
Because they always come from Etsy in the US format, which is
Oh
month, day,
yeah.
year.
Uh-huh.
And if you're in the UK, we do day, month, year. And
Yeah.
so you all the dates get read the wrong way if you see what I mean. So like
Yeah.
the 6th of the 8th could be the 6th of August or could be the 8th of June. And and they get all muddled up. And then if you're after the 12th of the month, so if you had like the 20th of August, so my version of Excel is trying to read that of the 8th day of the 20th month, which doesn't
Yeah.
exist. And so, it's just a real mess.
What a nightmare.
Oh, it's a complete nightmare. So when I first started selling them, I was getting lots of questions about, oh, my dates are all wrong, they don't get work. So I've kind of, from 90% of people, that's now all fixed, and that's kind of built into the template. So there's instructions for how to fix it.
Okay.
And I have YouTube videos now as well to help with that.
Great.
Um, so most questions that I was getting and are now hopefully covered somewhere. But there's always odd things. And funny, if I had a lady this week who, for some reason, her Etsy payment statement, she kept trying to open it in Excel, and the dates just aren't getting read at all. And I still have no idea why. But we were working on quite a few options. But you can always email me. So if you don't find the answer in the instructions, the troubleshooting, or on YouTube, just email me. And if you need to, send me a file and I will fix it for you. Because an easy thing for me to fix. It's a very difficult thing for you to work through. And
Yeah.
I get that. I do this every day. This is like your worst nightmare for most Etsy sellers. And
Yes.
I completely understand that. And so if everything else fails, just send me a file and I will fix it for you and send it back.
Okay.
So,
Whew. That's a lot, Sarah.
it's just, honestly, dates are just, you would think it's the easiest thing in the world, and it's just the
Y-
most difficult.
You would think.
Yeah.
And another thing that you offer, not just the bookkeeping spreadsheets, but you also offer fee calculators, which now that I'm thinking about it, I am based in the US, and I guess as a typical US seller, I don't often think about what a Canadian seller, um, how they would calculate their own fees and what have you, and a seller in the UK
Mm.
or Europe or wherever. But you've thought about this as well, and you also sell Etsy fee calculators based on location too. So there are differences, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences. I mean,
Mm.
the most obvious one is that in a lot of countries, tax is charged on top of your fees, like in the UK. So you have the normal taxes, but then we pay 20% on top of all of those as well. And
Mhm.
that again has just been launched in Canada. I don't actually have a fee calculator for Canada at the moment, but it is something. If people want that, just contact me and let me
Ask.
know, and I can build. Because I'm guessing it will be province specific as well,
Whoa.
because the tax that you pay on your fees in Canada will be dependent, I think, on where you're based. Um, so again, you would probably need to. I need to build in, tell me where you are, and then
Yeah.
I'll work your fees out based on that. So yeah, they do vary quite a lot, and it's just one of those things that I think, like I said, I've been lucky enough to work with so many people, and being, have a lot of discussion with people as well who sell in different places, and so it's definitely helped me understand what the differences are,
Yeah.
which I think, like I say, some people perhaps think, oh, I'll sell an Etsy spreadsheet, it's an easy thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
without really understanding what goes into the numbers behind it.
Yeah. Then you also have a pricing calculator worksheet. You have so much, Sarah, and I hope you don't mind us talking about them because I think it's really
No.
important. Like you said, it's not just one thing that does one thing. There's so many different things that go into really understanding our numbers so we can truly be successful and see, what our numbers look like and understand where we need to make changes. So your pricing, but before the pricing
Mm.
calculator, um have you seen the online Etsy profit calculators?
Yes, and I think some of those are really good.
Okay.
So certainly if you just want to do a quick check on something or check on your numbers, I
Yeah.
think that, some of them are great. Some,
Okay.
again, I would say just be slightly careful what you're looking at because
Okay.
some of them are US centric. So particularly if you're not in the US,
Yeah.
you need to make sure they do things like include, like there's a regulatory fee that's in some countries as well, and that the
Mhm.
taxes are in there. But no, I know that some of them are really good. So,
Okay. And that was my question because
mm,
I've used a couple and one one I shouldn't say one, but I don't always recall them taking into account things that pertain to non-US sellers like we were just talking about. And so
yeah.
just in our conversation I was thinking, oh wait, those online profit calculators might not be accurate for every seller in every country.
No, and I think it's almost where you probably just need a little bit of knowledge about what the fees should be,
Yeah.
so that you can just kind of go through and say, oh yes, it's got all the fees I'd expect to see, and as
Okay.
long as it does, and like I say, if you're charged tax, then make sure it includes the tax because that can have quite a big difference.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing as well that I think some of them miss is if Etsy charge tax on your behalf, that obviously some of the fees, so like the payment processing fee is paid not only on what you receive for the kind of the sale, but also what Etsy have charged in tax on top. So you need to make sure that that would be included, or just be
Yeah.
aware that it
Yeah.
might have an impact.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's the pricing calculator worksheet. One of the questions I ask almost every other seller, not you in this case, is how they figure out what to charge for their products. And now you have this pricing calculator worksheet, which I think will resolve that from everyone using, all kinds of different strategies and methods. Do I have that right?
I think so. I think the thing with pricing is that there's no right answer to how you set your pricing, but there's lots of wrong answers.
Mm,
And in that I mean that we always kind of try and look for this magic formula. Some
yeah.
people say, oh, it's your cost times two or times three, or
Yeah.
add this, and I think none of those there isn't a right way of doing it, but I think the wrong way is that you don't know how much it costs you to make your product. So I would say the starting point should always be know your costs, because if you're not covering your costs, then you're just losing money for every sale that you make, which is a crazy situation to be in.
Mm,
I think as long as you cover your costs, what you decide to charge on top of that is really up to you. And, it depends on your situation and what other costs you have of running your business. If you have a team of 3 people, or you have a big fancy office that you're trying to cover, you need to build more in probably on top of the actual cost of making the item than if you're just sat at home doing it yourself.
mhm.
Um, and also it depends. And then, yeah, look at your competitors, look at what the market sets. But like I say, at the minimum, you should know your costs, because
Yeah.
that should be your base price. No matter what you do on top of that,
Mhm.
never go below what it costs you to make it.
Okay. And to your point, that will be very different from a seller that primarily sells digital products versus someone who sells print on demand product versus someone who sells vintage products.
Yes, absolutely. So the pricing calculator I've got at the moment is really made for kind of physical manufactured products.
Okay.
So, jewelry or kind of things that are sewn or even paper items, I guess. But if you're doing print on demand or you're doing digital, it's very different. I mean, digital, you really need to look at how much it's costing you to develop the product and get it to a point, and then perhaps look at how many you need to sell to recover those costs.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, digital pricing is very different.
Yes. Okay. Good to know. And then there's vintage, which, you know, is its own thing because depending on where you source and how you source, you know, I think those sellers would also need to take into account the time that goes into sourcing vintage, because when it comes to vintage, your time, well, I get, for everybody your time is critical, or not critical, but is a factor. um yeah.
Yeah, and I think the time with vintage, because I guess you could spend a day traveling to a fair or to
Uh-huh.
a sale, which then not you almost need to split that time across multiple things, because if you bought 5 items, I guess you could divide it over the 5, or you might just see it as a kind of add up that time as more like an annual cost or a monthly cost of running your business, and then just try and recover that as more of like a general overhead of, so rather than trying to apportion it to the specific items that you bought in that one sale, you might say, oh, well, I spend 5 days a month traveling to fairs and buying things. So I'll just, you know, spread that cost over everything that I've bought in that month or everything that I sell in that month.
Okay.
So there are different ways of doing it, I think.
Okay. Now, Sarah, how does one know what spreadsheets to start with? So, a seller is listening to this and they're like, okay, I need to get organized. I need to figure out my numbers. And they come to your store made on the common. Where does one begin? Like, what's the best? Yeah. Where does
What's
one
the best
begin?
one? Where to start?
Yeah.
So I would say I would definitely start with a bookkeeping spreadsheet, because I think it will just give you visibility over a not only your Etsy sales and your fees, but there's space in there to track any other income or any other sales that you make and any other expenses that you have.
Okay.
So you can get a full view of your overall business. In
Okay.
terms of which bookkeep, because there's a lot of bookkeeping
Uh-huh.
spreadsheets in there now. I would say it depends on where you're based, so which country you're based in. If you're in a tax country, whether you're tax registered or not, so whether you're VAT registered or tax registered in Canada, and then really it's which platforms you sell on. So I don't have a full range of all of the different platforms. I'm literally just adding those now. So some of the ones that I haven't done too often are going to be made to order spreadsheets.
Okay.
And that's just because I want to double check that kind of like your Amazon data fits the template that I've set up, or your eBay data or whatever. But for
Okay.
Etsy and Shopify, there are a full range of those. If you, so I'd say start with the Etsy, and then look, if you sell on other platforms, look at how much you're selling. If you only have a few sales, then you could just use the other income sheet, another expenses sheet to, if you're happy to just manually record those, that's fine. If you sell a lot and you want to download your data and drop it in and have it all done for you, then I would choose which is your other main template. If you sell on kind of multiple platforms,
Uh-huh.
so I have some customers who do a lot on Etsy, Amazon, eBay,
Yeah.
and I don't know, Shopify or somewhere else, then just get in touch and I can probably build that for you as a custom spreadsheet. So I do an awful lot of custom, kind of bespoke, tell me which platforms you sell on and where you're
Okay.
based, and I can build that for you. So I've done quite a lot of the ones I'm most familiar with, I guess, are obviously Etsy and Shopify.
Okay.
Amazon and eBay, I've done quite a lot. I've done Wix, I've done Squarespace. I've done a couple of not on the high street ones for people who sell them there. WooCommerce is difficult because there's not a set kind of format that you can get your data down in. I have done a couple of WooCommerce ones, but they tend to be a little bit trickier.
Okay.
But yeah, just get in touch, either send me a message on Etsy or
Okay.
email me.
Okay.
And I'm
Wonderful.
always happy to help and have a look. And if I can't do something, then I'll tell you I can't, because I
Okay.
don't want to waste your time or my time. So
Yeah. Have you heard of Whatnot yet?
no, I've not actually. It's a new
Okay.
one.
It is a new one. um, you also have an Etsy payments and deposit manager. What's that for?
So that is so one of the tricky things with Etsy is trying to reconcile what you receive into your bank account with what you've actually earned, so what you've sold.
Okay.
And so, funnily, a variation of this was actually the first Etsy template that I did.
Okay.
And again, it came from my wanting to try and marry up what I'd been paid with what I'd earned.
Yeah.
And so this is what this template does. So it's not a full bookkeeping spreadsheet. There isn't another income and expenses, but it does give you a summary of your Etsy payment account. So the activity statement that you can see if you look on Etsy is in there, as actually it is in all of the bookkeeping spreadsheets. But then what this does, it will show you the balance on your Etsy payment account at the start of the month, what you've sold, what fees you've been charged, and then what you've been paid into your bank account, and then kind of reconciles all of that to the balance that's at the end of the month. Because your payment account on Etsy is a bit like a bank account, I guess. So you have money going in and then you have money coming out.
Yeah.
So the money going in is your sales, obviously your fees come out, and then anything that's been effectively, if you think of it as just a transfer from your Etsy bank account into your real bank account, and then obviously you're always left with the balance because there's always a timing difference at the end of the month. And so this just breaks that down into, so you can you should be able to double check that the balance you see if you look on Etsy is kind of proved, if you like, with what you've had sold and what you've received.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's that kind of missing piece of the puzzle. Because one of the things I really hate about the Etsy payment statement is that it tells you how much has been deposited into your bank account, but it doesn't actually give you that in a number that you can do anything with. It's like a text line in the middle of your payment account. It doesn't make
Yeah.
it. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. It should just be a negative number coming out, but I don't know why Etsy don't do it like that. They actually just have a separate report which tells you your deposits.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which is crazy, but that's what that one does.
Okay. That makes sense. Do you have any bundles that just have like all the starter spreadsheets that a seller would need?
I don't, but that is a great idea actually, and it's something I'd been thinking of doing.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that there's a lot in the shop and it can be a bit confusing, and so almost like adding more. I didn't know if
Yeah.
that would be more confusing, but I think it might be a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the two things that actually I don't have at the moment, which is something I'm hoping to add, I've been meaning to add it, and I keeps getting delayed, is something to kind of look at the stats side as well, so your traffic side, and then something to kind of really drill down into your sales. So what have you sold? What's your best seller? What do you make the most money on?
Oh, yeah.
Because
That
I
would
think
be
those
great.
those two, to me, the three bits, then the bookkeeping, the sales, and the stats, so if you had all of that, then that really gives you everything that you need to manage your Etsy shop. So
Yeah. And I was just thinking about this. I know we've mentioned the US, we've mentioned the UK and Canada, but these, I believe, also work for sellers in Australia, because the reason I found out about you was from Michelle Watson, whose Etsy shop, The Better Grind.
yes.
She was on the podcast and you were her shout out.
Yes,
And
I
that,
was. And yeah,
yes.
thank
So,
you very much to Michelle for that.
yes, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, so the reason they work, so They basically work anywhere where you have your payment account in English.
Okay.
Because of how the templates work, it uses certain phrases and terms in your payment account statement to kind of split your fees into the right places. So it looks for the word refund or it looks for the word sale.
Okay.
So if your payment account is in a different language, it doesn't work. So I have done a couple in for sellers, particularly in Quebec in Canada, who have it in French.
Oh.
Um, and a couple because for some reason I started getting a few requests from Holland as well in Europe.
Yeah.
So I've kind of done a Dutch version, but because
Whoa.
I don't speak Dutch and I don't speak much French, I'm slightly wary because I can't double check that it's 100% right. So I'm kind of reliant on the people who use it to tell me if something's not right. But yeah, so they'll basically work anywhere that's English speaking. Australia, because of how their tax system works, is actually very similar to the UK.
Okay.
The tax rates are different, but the structure is very, very similar. So the ones that I sell for the UK tend to work in Australia as well.
Okay. Wow, Sarah, you're doing so much.
Oh, it's kind of it's just grown, I guess, over time. So I started off, like I say, with just one. So I had an Etsy bookkeeping spreadsheet, and
Uh-huh.
then I think somebody in the US said, "Oh, this is great, but could I have a tax column because I need tax?" And then,
Mm.
somebody in Canada would say, "Oh, this is great, but could you do this?" So gradually, just over time, it's kind of splintered off and done. And I guess it's funny because it's only when you start talking about it that you realize how much it has evolved.
Yeah.
People always say don't compare somebody else's, middle to your beginning or whatever. And I kind of know what they mean now because it's
Mm.
definitely from what I know now to what I knew 2 years ago, it's definitely changed a lot.
Yeah.
So
Would you ever, and this is probably I, anyway, I'll ask it anyway. Would you ever consider going back to the corporate world or,
no,
okay.
100, absolutely 100% no. I've kind of got so I guess I'm semi-retired in how I am now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of after I'd been made redundant, I took a couple of years off, and then I went back and did do a little bit of contracting.
Okay.
Um, but then I remember it was a beautiful. I actually contracted over the summer, and it was a beautiful day. And I was sat in this office again, thinking, "Why am I back here? This is crazy."
Yeah.
Whereas now I get to work from home, which I love. I get to work from anywhere, which is even better. So
Yeah.
I'm actually sat down in Cornwall at the moment. We live in the Cotswolds in the southwest of England, but we spend a lot of time down in Cornwall, and I'm actually there at the moment.
Nice.
And it's great because I can work from anywhere that I am. I love the people that I work with and the kind of the people I've met through doing this. There are so many fabulous Etsy sellers out there, and I'm always amazed when I kind of, slightly spy on the people that I sell to and look at what they sell. And it just amazes me what people do. And I think it's great. And yeah, I'm much happier kind of
Yeah.
supporting the people that I support now to when I was working in corporate world. And it was a massive corporation that you were a tiny, tiny little cog in. So
Yeah. I just think it's so beautiful when people hit their stride like you have. And so when you get a request to make some new type of spreadsheet or tracker that you haven't made before, it brings you joy. I feel like from our
it does,
conversation it
it
brings
does.
you
And I
joy.
know most
Yeah.
people will think, oh my God, it would be my worst nightmare doing
Yes.
spreadsheets. It's like, oh my God, so you spend your days building spreadsheets. I love it. And I think I've always been a problem solver. So if somebody, sends me a message and says, oh, I'd love to be able to do this. Or I think somebody asked me a while ago, they were looking at their Etsy ads and, how could I track my Etsy ads? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I'll have a look at that, and to pull the data out and then to be able to transform it and send it back to people in a way that makes sense and that they can look
Yeah.
at it is just I get such joy from doing that. So
Yeah. That's fantastic. Now, Sarah, how do you create boundaries because you enjoy what you do so much and you work from home, but then you have to have that balance between work and your personal life. How do you create boundaries around that? Do you put time limits on yourself for when you'll focus on work and when, you cut off?
Um, I think I'm quite bad at putting boundaries. My husband would probably say I'm very bad.
Okay.
Um, I think I only work part time, so I don't do this like all day every day.
Okay.
And it's very much I don't really have a regular routine. So I try and I don't often work at weekends, but I'll sometimes do little bits. And I tend to work more in the afternoon. So mornings tend to be more kind of personal and house things, or I have a dog, so I go out with the dog and we take and if it's a nice day, then I won't work and we'll go out. And
Yeah.
it's lucky enough that I'm very flexible.
Yeah.
But equally, if I'm enjoying doing something, or I'm kind of stuck into a project and I'm trying to fix something, then yeah, I'll just kind of keep going till I get it done. So
Okay. I have a question about how it was for you in the beginning. I know you started off with the bookmarks, but then
yeah,
sorry?
no, just laughing. Yes, I did.
But then, okay, when you pivoted into the spreadsheets, Etsy, the way I think about it, is a platform geared towards, or a marketplace, I should say, aimed at people who are looking for a different type of products. They're coming there to shop for home goods or clothing or jewelry. What was it like for you to start to find your customers who aren't typically, considered, Etsy's typical type of buyer? Your customers are fellow Etsy sellers and you're selling, a product that, is not, it's not like what we see on the Etsy
Yeah.
ads. Like we wouldn't see an Etsy ad for bookkeeping spreadsheets. So how was it? What did you do to start to attract your customers to you?
Um, I started. I used to post on Pinterest quite a lot. So when I first started, I found I got quite a lot of traffic via Pinterest,
Okay.
which was great. And then I think I gradually got found in Etsy search. Funnily enough, the first bookkeeping spreadsheet I listed, I think it was nearly 3 months before it sold, because I kind of
Wow.
listed it and then thought, oh well, that didn't work, did it? But
Yeah.
I mean, the thing of digital is, well, it can just sit there, and then it started selling, and then after that, it just sort of took off.
Uh-huh.
And I guess because I sell to Etsy sellers, mainly
Yeah.
they are on Etsy, so I get an awful lot of traffic through Etsy search. I've started now. So then Pinterest died a horrible death for me a couple of years, well, probably about a year and a half ago. I don't really know why it just suddenly fell off a cliff and it's never recovered. So
Interesting.
I kind of gave up on that. Um, and then I seem to get quite a lot of traffic now coming from Google, which is great. Some of it off-site ads, but some of it just organic traffic.
Okay.
Um, so it just seems to take up, but still predominantly kind of Etsy driven, I guess, which is
Okay.
great. Although I'm conscious of trying not to rely too much on that because it can always change.
Yeah. Do you think that your Google driven traffic increased because you changed something, say, about your descriptions and they're more um like maybe you're using more keywords that they're picking up on, or is it
I
just
think
they
partly,
discovered
I
you?
think some of it is just time. I think Google does
Okay.
tend to take a while, but that's fine. I mean, I do try and do um, kind of keyword research and SEO and really try and focus on that side of it because I think, again, with the nature of what I sell, social media isn't so great for me. And I'm not that great at
Yeah.
social media either, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah.
So for me, and then the other way that I do it and that I do try and focus on is I have a website where I try and post a lot of like more longer articles about bookkeeping and finances and Etsy. and things, and that does drive me quite a lot of traffic as well. So, I'll have
Okay.
a link through there back to the Etsy shop. So,
Okay. And I was, it's like you read my
mm,
mind because I was
mm.
going to say you have this website. And for anyone who wants to check out Sarah's website, it's madeonthecommon.com. I will have a link to it in the show notes for this episode. So there, Sarah, you tend to do more blogging, which, we know is good for search engine traffic. And then the shop link on that site actually links to your Etsy shop. It's not an e-commerce website.
It isn't at the moment. No, I
Okay.
recently changed. So I used to have a WordPress website, and I've
Okay.
changed to Squarespace a couple of months ago.
Whoa.
Um, and I am intending on listing my products on there, but I just
Okay.
haven't done that yet.
Okay. It's so interesting that you mentioned that. This is 100% a tangent from what we're talking about, but I recently discovered Squarespace, and I'm actually creating Squarespace templates for Etsy sellers so that they can,
Okay. Oh, that's
yeah, because
interesting.
it's so much, the learning curve is so much less than on WordPress, and
Yes,
it's
definitely.
all contained in there. You can do so much with so much more with Squarespace. So,
I find it, yeah, I find it so much easier. And I'd got, I had kind of a very small hack on my WordPress site. So somebody did hack it.
oh,
Um,
yeah,
and I think it just scared, I kind of got a bit scared after that, because I'm not,
yeah,
that if you don't keep really up to date with all the security and the
yes,
plugins and the patches, and I just thought, no, I just need to go somewhere where they do all that for you. So
yes.
that was a big driver for me. But I do find it so much easier to update, I have
Yeah,
to say.
same here. And I got
Mm,
hacked too, and
yeah.
I was so spooked by it. It just the fact that somebody I didn't know from somewhere got into my website.
Yes.
And then to make it worse, the person said the person messaged me. I don't even like talking about it. It
Oh, that's even
was
worse. Yeah.
yes, and it was so creepy, and I said, WordPress, I am done. I
Yeah. I
yeah,
just find, yeah, I just thought, no, I don't, I just not happy with this at all. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So you said social media is not really you're not really great at it, and it seems like you're doing just fine without social media. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I have Facebook and I have Instagram.
yeah.
So probably do more on Facebook. And some of that I do get kind of traffic for. I'm really fortunate in that a lot of my customers will post into Facebook groups and
Okay.
recommend me. So
Oh,
every now
nice.
and again I get kind of big spikes in Facebook traffic,
Okay.
which is all down to them. So massive thank you to them.
Nice.
I'm not as good, and I think it's good if somebody else says, "Oh, try this," try Made on Common spreadsheets. They're good. That's worth 100 times more than me saying, "Oh, try my templates. I think
Yeah.
they're really good."
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. And so I keep a kind of a presence on Facebook and Instagram. I
Okay.
wouldn't say I'm not, I mean, I don't really use it personally either. So
Yeah.
it's not my big thing. So,
Okay. What are, if any, are there any resources that you find particularly helpful in running your business?
so I mean, I use a lot of software, I guess. So obviously Canva, which most people recommend anyway.
Yeah.
So for doing the because you have to do a lot of mock-ups with kind of spreadsheets and
Yeah.
digital items. So yeah, Canva is an absolute lifesaver.
Okay.
I use MailerLite for my email list, which has been brilliant.
Mhm.
And actually, it's invaluable for me because I mentioned earlier I give free updates. The one thing I kind of really struggled with about a year and a half ago was I needed to do a big. I think Etsy put through a change middle of last year, which was only a relatively small change, but I had to change the templates. And I needed to find a way of getting the new ones out to everybody, because you can't download a new version from Etsy. Once you've
Okay.
bought, you're stuck with the version that you've got. I
Yeah.
think Creative Market, I think, do provide updates, which is fabulous. Etsy don't. So I found a way of I created kind of pages on my website to hold all of the spreadsheets. So depending on which one you have, you can get access to that. And I load the most up-to-date versions onto the page. And then I use MailerLite to kind of segment all of my email lists
Yeah.
by template. So basically, if you buy a spreadsheet, in the instructions, I'll give you a link and it says, oh, please register your template because then I can give you free updates.
Oh,
And so,
wow. Yeah.
which is great, and it does help me because I get people on my email list, but equally it helps them because that's how I communicate
Yeah.
if something's changed and how you get access to the latest versions. But so MailerLite has been brilliant, and it's only recently I started having to pay for that. So the first couple
Oh,
of years,
that's good. That means
I
you
just
crossed that
used the free,
number.
but well, yeah, but which is like good and bad. It's lovely, but
Yeah.
no, it's great, and I have a very engaged email list, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
But no, I found MailerLite is, it's not perfect, but it let me do just about everything that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And like I say, it was free, so that was good. The other tool I use, which I don't know if many people, if you have to share kind of digital files with customers, again, it was something I struggled with because if I do a custom template, I tend to do a video showing you how to use it.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't, then I thought, well, how do I share the video? Because it's too big to email, and how do you do that? So I use a tool called WeTransfer, which again is free. You can load it's a bit like Dropbox, I guess. You load your files up there and they can download them.
Okay.
And the files stay live for 7 days, but it also, then I get notification once they've been downloaded, which is really useful. So that's quite a good one that I found I used quite a bit.
I've never heard of that one. That's great.
No, it was actually, it was a kind of a personal friend of mine was sending me some photos and he said, oh, I've loaded them up to WeTransfer, and a little light bulb went off and I thought, oh, I could use that for my business. That would be great.
Is it free to use?
Yes, it's free. So there is a paid version as well, but the free version, like I said, the files stay live for 7 days. So when I email out to say, your custom spreadsheet's ready, I'll say you've got 7 days to download. And then if they don't download for whatever reason, you have to re-upload them again. But that's fine. But no, I'd like to say, I found it very good. Nobody seems to have had any problems downloading at the other end.
Okay.
And you get notification, or they'll warn you, it's about to expire and it's not been downloaded.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's good. And like I say, having the confirmation as well of download is quite useful. So.
Okay. And then as far as getting people on your mailing list, how do you actually get them on? So when they purchase the product, do you direct them to sign up so they can get updates? What's your process for that?
I do. So I have, there are a couple of sign-ons on my website anyway for various things. But then the two main ways is I do offer a discount code if you sign up before purchase. So that's quite popular.
Okay.
And then, once you've bought, in the instruction kind of guide, I kind of give you the link to be able to register, saying that you've already purchased one. And then that, like I say, I will then send you a link to the template hub, which is where the latest files are uploaded for your version. Yeah. And then if anything changes, I can, if it's just, for example, this year, the Canadian ones changed quite a lot. So I was able to just contact all of the Canadian purchasers to say, oh, there's an update, whereas it didn't affect the UK people. So, so that's been quite good. I mean, again, it's slightly difficult because obviously you can't use the email address that you get with the purchase, but doing it that way, I do find I have quite a lot of people sign up.
Okay. And other than updates, do you email your list about anything else?
Yeah, I tend to email. I try and do once a week, but it's more likely about once a fortnight.
Okay.
Just either if something's changed or if there's something new in the shop, or just so like this week, because I've just written a new blog post all about Etsy fees, so I kind of shared that. Or it might be to say, I don't know, just like general bookkeeping tips or various different things like that. So I try and keep people just updated, or if something's changed on Etsy that I think they should know about, I would email that out as well.
Okay, cool. Sarah, do you have any Etsy shop shout outs?
So I was thinking about this, and it's very difficult because most of my customers are Etsy
That's
shops,
right. Yes.
and so I don't feel it's fair to single anyone out in particularly. So
That
the
makes
shout
sense.
out that I do have is actually a close friend of mine who him and his sister opened a shop, I think at the end of last year. And it's called Betty Bug 2020. So I'll kind of send you the writing, and they
Yeah.
sell baby sleeping bags and swaddle wraps and kind of gift boxes that they're doing at the moment.
Oh,
And the one
nice.
thing that's really nice about their shop is that they give a portion of their kind of profit back to cancer research, which I think is
Oh,
a lovely thing to do. So yes,
yeah.
that would be my friend. So to Anthony and Melissa who run Betty Book 2020, if you're
Oh, I
looking for
like that.
baby gifts this Christmas, go and take a look at that one.
Oh, yes, yes. And this episode is airing just in time for that. So
Oh, well, there you go. That's perfect.
hopefully folks will hop over there and take a look. And I really like mission focused shops. Well, not mission focused per se, but shops that give back too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that was Betty Book
Book.
2020.
Yeah. So BUG and then 2020.
Oh, okay. Bug. Okay. All right. And I will have a link to that in the show notes for this episode as well. So folks can go and check out what Anthony and Melissa are doing. Sarah, is there anything else we haven't talked about? I feel like I grilled you so much on the spreadsheets that you sell, but is there anything you think we missed that you think it's important for someone who's listening right now to know?
I don't think so. I guess the one message I would have for all Etsy sellers is, regardless of what you use to do your bookkeeping or to keep track of your numbers, just use something. If it's
Mm,
paper and pen, then just use that. But just get to know your numbers,
mm,
and so that you know how much you're making, because that's how you'll kind of grow. If you don't know where you are, then I think you can't. You're not. It's difficult to know where to go to grow and what's working and what isn't. So just use anything. If you're happy using accounting software like Xero or QuickBooks or something,
mm.
fine, use that. Just use something, whatever it is. Don't kind of put it in the too hard pile and don't do it. So
Yeah. Would you say that one would need QuickBooks in addition to your spreadsheets, or are they complementary, or do they do the same thing? So it's one or the other.
um, for most people, I would say it's one or the other.
Okay.
I think there's kind of like a progression. So if you're literally just selling one or two things a month, then like I say, write it down paper and pencil, or do your
Mm,
own thing.
mm,
I think there then gets to a middle ground where probably the spreadsheets come in. And I have some massive sellers who still use the spreadsheets, which is fabulous.
yeah.
Um, I think again, as you get more and more complex, if you get a massive volume of business going through and you become tax registered, and you're a limited company or LLC and you need to do more, then I think there probably comes a point when the accounting software probably steps in. Some people, particularly the tax registered, they use my spreadsheets to calculate the numbers and do the tax and then feed them into QuickBooks or Xero.
Okay.
So there's people use them in a lot of different ways. And I think it really just comes down to volume of transactions and the complexity of your business affairs. So,
Okay.
how much expenses you have and how many different types and what you need to track. But I think there's definitely the middle ground, that the spreadsheets come in. So
Okay. Whew. Sarah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
no, thank you. And I guess I would just say if anybody has any questions about their finances or doesn't know if it's right for you or what they should be using, please just message me.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to answer questions.
What's the best way they can connect with you?
So either message me on Etsy if that's easy for you, or probably the best way would be to email me. So it's just sarah@madeonthecommon.com. And I, check my messages every day. So
Okay.
I would be able to get back to you.
All right. So I will have links to of course, Sarah's website and her Etsy shop, both are called Made on the Common. Her Etsy shop is Made on the Common and her website is madeonthecommon.com if you want to hop over there. And then also I will put her email. So if you're driving and you need to come back to this, it will all be in the show notes for this episode. Sarah, thanks again so much for being my guest on the podcast. Thank you for educating us about what we need to know to truly be successful as Etsy sellers and for providing the solutions that help us do that too.
No, thank you very much for having me on. I've enjoyed talking with you.
So have I. And I thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I will be back with another episode next time. Again, if you would like to support the podcast, if you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to hear more of these, please go to convome.com/support and you can do that there.
Thank you.